Rain hammered the glass doors as the little girl slammed into them, palms squealing on the polished surface, breath bursting in panicked clouds. She shoved through the revolving door, hair plastered to her cheeks. "Help!" she cried, voice cracking. "Please, somebody help! They hurt my mom! She's dying!" Executives froze mid-stride. Security glanced at each other, uncertain. The lobby's marble gleamed. The world felt too clean for the word dying. Ben, the janitor, dropped his mop. He moved before the echo of the girl's plea reached the ceiling. "Where?" he asked, kneeling in front of her, steady eyes meeting hers without flinching. "At home," she sobbed. She fell. There was a man. She's bleeding so much. Please." "What's your name?" His voice was warm, calm, even as his hands trembled once behind his back. "Lila." "All right, Lila, you did the right thing. What's your address?" He spoke to the security guard without looking up. "Call an ambulance now. Tell them severe trauma, uncontrolled bleeding, possible head injury." He squeezed Lila's shoulder. "We're going." The guard hesitated, glancing toward the bank of elevators where the CEO had just stepped out. The CEO who never missed a chance to sneer at the man with the mop. Daniel Grant stared over, puzzled irritation darkening his face. "What's going on?" Daniel asked sharply. Ben didn't answer. He was already moving, guiding Lila toward the door, snagging a small first aid kit from the concierge desk without asking. "Put me on speaker with dispatch," he told the guard, then into the phone. "Adult female, mid-30s. Unknown mechanism, probable assault. Patient possibly unconscious. We're en route." "Dispatch ETA?" He listened. "Copy, we'll stabilize." Daniel took a step after them, annoyance tangled with an unfamiliar hollow fear. "Lila?" he said, voice snagging. The girl flinched at her name, then bolted, clinging to Ben's sleeve. Outside, rain pummeled the streets. Ben threw his jacket around Lila and hustled her into the first cab, flinging bills at the driver, rattling off the address. "Sir, I can't—" The driver started. "You can," Ben said, voice soft, final. "Please!" The cab lunged into motion. Lila wrapped her arms around herself, teeth chattering. Ben took her hand. "Can you tell me what you saw?" "I heard the door," she whispered. "Mom told me to hide." I hid by the couch. He pushed her. She hit her head on the table. "There was blood and I ran and—" Her breath hitched. "Is she going to die?" He didn't lie. "I'm going to do everything I can to keep her alive until the ambulance gets there." He passed her the first aid kit to hold, turned to the driver. 2 more lights, then left. Back at the lobby, Daniel stood rigid, phone to his ear, rain on his cuff from the brief step he'd taken toward the door. "Claire?" he rasped into voicemail, then again and again. He forced himself to move. "Bring my car," he snapped at the valet. "Now." The cab fishtailed to a stop on a quiet street, tires hissing on the wet. Lila burst out before it halted. Ben followed, muscles remembering patterns he had promised himself he'd never use again. The front door hung ajar. Inside, the house was wrong. Too quiet, too bright in the hallway where a lamp lay on its side, too red in a crescent smear across the floor. "Stay behind me," he said. He scanned quickly. Signs of forced entry, scattered bag, a toppled chair. "Lila, wait here. Count to 20 out loud for me." "Why?" she whispered. "So I know you're safe." She started counting, voice shaking. Ben knelt by the woman on the floor. Claire's hair was matted, her lips pale, breath shallow and ragged. Blood pulsed from a laceration at the scalp and oozed from a gash on the forearm. He flipped open the kit, went clinical, gloves, gauze pressed firm, elevate, not too much, airway tilt minimal, C-spine caution, quick look for chest rise, pulse thready, rapid, pupils reactive, abdomen soft, no obvious deformity. He murmured, more to keep himself from slipping under memory than for anyone else. "You're okay? You're here. You're not alone." Lila reached 15 through tears. Sirens keened faintly in the distance. "Lila, I need towels, clean ones." "Kitchen, second drawer if you have a drawer for towels." He forced a smile he didn't feel. "Run like lightning." She flew and returned, breathless, pressing towels into his hands. He replaced soaked gauze, firm and constant. "You're doing perfect," he said. "Can you find your mom's phone? Unlock if you can." Lila sprinted again and came back with a phone and a small note card from the fridge. Emergency contacts. Ben skimmed, tapped the first number and lifted it to his ear with a bloody glove, then stopped. He couldn't call with those hands. "Lila, call this number," he said, pointing. A voice answered on the first ring. Lila's voice cracked. "Dad?" Daniel's chest seized. "Lila, where are you?" "Are you hurt?" "I'm okay, Mom's bleeding. The janitor is helping. He's doing stuff. He told me to call." "The janitor?" Daniel's confusion spiked, then drained in a rush of dread. "Give him the phone." Lila held the phone out. Ben didn't move his hands from the wound. "Speaker," he instructed. She pressed the button. "Who is this?" Daniel demanded. "Keep the line open," Ben said. "Ambulance is 2 minutes out." Claire's breathing. Head laceration, significant blood loss, but airway is patent. She's responsive to pain. "How do you—" Daniel started, stopped, breath ragged. He could hear the wet, steady calm in the stranger's voice, the absence of panic. "Is she going to—" "I'm holding pressure. We'll get her to the hospital. Drive carefully." He heard the siren swell until it pressed against his teeth. Dispatch radio crackled in the background as paramedics stormed in. "Where are we?" the first medic asked, dropping a bag. "Scalp laceration 3 centimeters, occipital region. Forearm laceration, venous bleed controlled. Possible concussion, pulse 130s, thready. BP felt low. No obvious chest or abdominal trauma." She regained consciousness briefly, confused speech. The medic's head jerked up in surprised respect. "You medical?" "Not anymore. They worked in tandem." Ben didn't need to be told. He was already readying an IV site, then stopped himself and stepped back, letting the medic do the invasive work. His hands hovered inches away, remembering lines and veins and what it felt like when a life slid out of them despite everything. "Sir," the second medic said to Ben after a beat of recognition that flickered and vanished. "Ride with us?" "Her daughter," Ben said, looking at Lila. "I'm going with my mom," Lila said, voice steel under tremor. "Then both," the medic decided, already wheeling the gurney. Daniel's car screamed into the street as they loaded Claire. He stumbled out, hair plastered, shoes slipping on the slick. "Claire!" He reached for her, whitened at the sight of blood staining the stretcher sheet. "Sir, step back," a medic barked gently. "Dad!" Lila cried. He scooped her close with one arm, then looked at Ben as if seeing him for the first time, blinking at the incongruity. The uniform, the gloves, the sure gaze. You're the janitor," Daniel said, stupid with shock. Ben nodded once. "Get in your car. Follow the ambulance, don't try to pass. Don't call anyone who'll slow you down." Daniel didn't argue. He barely breathed as he followed flashing lights through rain-blurred streets, fingers clenched on the wheel until the leather bit skin. In the rear view, he kept seeing Ben's hands, calm where his own trembled. At the hospital, the doors banged open, the gurney swallowed by a wave of nurses. Ben and Lila tumbled out of the ambulance behind them. Daniel pushed through the doors, heart thudding loud enough to drown the waiting room hum. A nurse barred his way with gentle authority. "You can't go back yet." "She's my wife," he rasped. "I know, let them work." He turned, disoriented, and found Lila's small hand seeking his. He gripped it too hard. "I'm here," he said, like a promise he wished he'd kept more often. Ben stood a step away, stripped of gloves, hands bare, a red crescent beneath each nail where gauze had slipped. He stared at the floor, at his shoes, at the line where mopped rainwater met scuffed tile. Daniel looked at him, words crawling to his tongue and evaporating. Thank you felt too small, too late. Seconds dragged into years. A door swung, a voice called a code he didn't understand, and his stomach turned to stone. Lila looked at Ben instead of her father. "Is she going to be okay?" she asked again, a child summoning faith from the same source that had steadied her on a rain-dark street. Ben folded his hands to keep them from shaking. "She's strong. They're strong." "You did exactly what you needed to do." "She always tells me to look people in the eyes," Lila whispered, swallowing. "You looked right at me, no one else did." He had no answer for that. He didn't say that sometimes people in suits stepped around pain like it was a spill on a floor scheduled for cleaning at a more convenient time. He didn't say that he had once walked corridors like these with a white coat and an ID clipped to the pocket where a mop handle now rubbed a permanent shine. And he didn't say the name that rose and stuck like a bone in his throat, Oliver. The doors opened again. A nurse leaned out. "Family of Claire Grant?" Daniel lurched. "Yes. Please wait in consultation 2. The attending will be with you shortly." They were led into a small, too-bright room with chairs too clean to be real. Ben stopped at the threshold, then hovered by the door, ready to retreat. "Come in," Lila said. She didn't ask her father. Daniel nodded mechanically. "Please," he managed. Ben stepped inside, stood in the corner as if he could make himself less real. The attending physician entered, a woman with steady eyes. She introduced herself, washed her hands, looked at all 3 of them. "Claire has a significant scalp laceration and a concussion. There's no intracranial bleed on the initial scan, which is very good news. Her blood pressure was low from blood loss. We're managing that. She'll need sutures and observation." Daniel's knees almost went. He grabbed the chair back. Is she going to live?" "Yes," the doctor said. "Thanks to very fast, appropriate first aid on scene." Daniel turned his head slowly toward Ben. The doctor followed his gaze and tilted hers in return, evaluating. She didn't smile. She didn't need to. "Whoever controlled that bleeding did it right," she said. "And whoever watched her airway saved us time we might not have had." Ben swallowed. "Can we see her?" "In a bit," the doctor said. "She's sedated." She woke briefly, asked for her daughter. She looked at Lila. "We'll bring you in when she's ready." They left. Silence thudded into the space they vacated. Daniel tried to speak and found his voice gone. Finally, he looked at Ben with eyes that were not the same as they had been an hour ago. "Thank you," Ben shook his head. "Anyone would have helped." "That's not true," Daniel said, the admission landing between them with the weight of something that might become a beginning. Outside, rain softened to a whisper. Inside, monitors beeped in rooms they couldn't enter yet. Lila leaned her head on Daniel's arm, and Daniel stared at the man he had taken for a shadow in his own building, trying to understand how a shadow could have such steady hands. Claire slept under soft, relentless light. When Daniel and Lila were finally allowed in, her skin looked translucent, the white of her bandage too stark against her hair. Lila climbed carefully onto the chair beside the bed and threaded her fingers through her mother's. "I'm here," she whispered, as if proximity could seal a wound. Daniel hovered, his hands useless. The attending murmured about observation and rest, then left them in the hush that falls like a blanket after sirens fade. Ben stood at the doorway, ready to disappear. Daniel turned. "Stay," he said, surprising himself. "Please." Ben stayed. Minutes stretched. Daniel cleared his throat, the sound loud in the small room. "How did you know what to do?" he asked, careful, like stepping onto uncertain ice. Ben's eyes didn't leave Claire's slow, steady breaths. He started, stopped. He sorted words the way he sorted instruments years ago, by utility and edge. "I learned it a long time ago." "Where?" Daniel pressed, not from entitlement but hunger, an ache to understand the hand that had caught his wife's life where his own would have fumbled. "In another life," Ben said. Lila looked up. "Were you a hero?" He flinched at the word. "No." "Mom says heroes are people who show up when others don't," Lila said, matter of fact. "You showed up," he swallowed. "Your mom is wise." Daniel studied him the way he studied quarterly reports. For patterns, for the cracks where a truth might be hiding. "I've seen you every day," he said slowly, "and I've never seen you." Ben didn't answer. Silence did the job. A nurse stepped in, checked vitals, smiled at Lila, nodded at Ben, didn't look at Daniel long enough to feed his authority. "She's doing well," the nurse said. "Keep talking to her." People hear more than we think when they're asleep. Lila leaned closer and told her mother about the rain, about how the cab smelled like peppermint gum, about how she'd run so fast her shoes squeaked. Daniel listened like a thief at a door, stealing warmth from a child's voice and realizing it had been free all along. Outside, a handprint of dawn pressed against the edge of the sky. Daniel's phone vibrated with texts he didn't read. A board member called. He silenced it. Another call from PR. He let it go. He thought of the faces in the lobby, Startled stillness when the child had cried for help. Coins falling out of Empathy's pockets and rolling under the sofas. He looked at Ben again. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "For what?" Ben's voice was mild, but not forgiving by default. "For everything," Daniel said. "For every time I walked past you like your name was maintenance instead of Ben. For every time I valued a minute of my schedule over a person's dignity. For believing I was worth more than you." Ben's face didn't soften. It didn't need to. He nodded once as if he'd been waiting to hear the truth spoken aloud, not for his sake, but for Daniel's. "We all forget sometimes," he said. "What matters is what we remember after. Where did you learn to talk like that?" Daniel asked, a rough attempt at levity that landed closer to hunger again. "In rooms like this," Ben said, eyes flicking to the monitors. "With people who didn't get to finish their sentences." Daniel absorbed that. He wanted to ask everything, but the questions felt like prying into scars still tender. He settled for sitting down, for holding his wife's hand and counting breaths like prayer beads. Hours passed in small ways. Lila slept curled on the chair, her hand still on her mother's wrist. Daniel went for bad coffee and came back with 3 cups, surprised to find his hands remembered how to fetch something for someone else. He offered one to Ben. "Thank you," Ben said simply, and took it, and they drank without filling the silence with useless words. Mid-morning, the attending returned with a colleague who glanced at levels and numbers and nodded. "She's stable," the attending said. "We'll move her to a room soon. You can stay with her. We'll have social work speak with you later regarding the assault report." Daniel stiffened. A knife of rage slipped between his ribs, so sharp it almost felt like clarity. "They hurt her," he said uselessly, the words like shoes on the wrong feet. Lila woke, blinked, rubbed her eyes. "Mom?" Claire didn't wake, but her hand tightened around Lila's fingers. "She knows you're here," Ben said. Lila slid off the chair, crossed to him. "Will you still be here?" she asked. He glanced at Daniel, as if the CEO might revoke the temporary amnesty he had granted against invisibility. Daniel swallowed pride like medicine. "Please," he said again. "I'll stay a while," Ben said. "I have a shift later." He said it like the weight of a mop was a penance he owed. Daniel nodded, then looked toward the door, where the world waited with its neon teeth. "I need to make some calls," he said, hating the sound of it and meaning it differently this time. "Not PR." He stepped into the hallway and dialed the detective whose number the nurse had given him. He demanded everything and nothing in the same breath. Cameras checked, neighbors asked, a list of things he could do that weren't just standing with clenched fists and a throat full of heat. In the room, Lila sat on the floor near Ben's chair. "Can I ask you a secret?" she said. "You can ask." "Why did you say not anymore when the ambulance man asked if you were a doctor?" The words landed like a pebble on a mirror. "Because I used to be," he said, slower than she'd asked. "Why did you stop?" He looked at the sleeping woman, at the child with a gaze like a key that fit locks he hadn't opened in years. He thought of Oliver's laugh, the way it bubbled up like water from a spring that hadn't believed in drought. "My son got sick," he said, each word measured like a step downstairs in the dark. "I made mistakes. I couldn't fix them. I couldn't fix him." "Did he die?" Lila asked softly, the way children ask when they've decided to hold sorrow without turning away. "Yes," Ben said, and in the saying, a door somewhere in him swung on its hinges and didn't slam shut again. Lila reached out and touched his sleeve. "I'm sorry." "Me too," he said, and for a second the hospital room was an island, floating on a sea that had drowned a man and then washed him up on a lobby floor with a mop in his hands. Daniel came back, face set. "They'll pull street cameras," he said, more to fill the room with a promise of action than because it would fix the terror of last night. He looked at Ben. "Thank you for staying." Ben nodded. "When I leave, I'll tell the nurse. They'll call me if you need anything before I'm back." "Back?" Daniel asked, startled, then realized, the building, work. The world where he had been king of the schedule and the schedule had never included this. "I work," Ben said, and the understatement laid bare the difference between jobs and callings, between what paid the rent and what paid a debt to the dead. "Right," Daniel said, stung by the smallness of his earlier view. Right, Claire stirred. They went still, 3 statues wound with breath. Her eyelids fluttered, then opened, unfocused, then focused on a ceiling she didn't know. She grimaced, tried to lift her hand, winced. Hey, Daniel said, voice breaking like ice. Hey, I'm here. Lila leaned close. Mom, I'm here. We're okay, Mr. Ben helped. Claire's eyes shifted, found the girl, then Daniel, then Ben, white. Confusion softened into relief that hurt to look at. Lila, she whispered. Daniel. You're safe, Daniel said, the words both promise and penance. Claire's gaze slid back to Ben. Gratitude moved across her face like dawn. Thank you, she said. He shook his head. Rest, he said. That's your job. She smiled faintly and let the drug-soft dark take her again. The door opened. The attending gestured. We'll transfer her now. They stepped back as the bed rolled, as the world reconfigured around the geometry of movement. In the hall, the board member finally broke through Daniel's silence wall with another call. Daniel stared at the name and answered. Not now, he said. Not today. When the voice on the other end launched into concerns about liability and headlines, Daniel interrupted. Listen to me. A child ran into our lobby and no one moved. That's our headline. Fix the kind of company that makes good people freeze. He hung up before the reply could harden him. He turned to Ben. Come back to the office with us, he said. Ben blinked. Why? Because I owe you more than a thank you and a coffee, Daniel said. Because I need to show you that I see you. Because I need to say it in front of people who watched you become invisible. I don't need a stage, Ben said. This isn't for you, Daniel said, then caught himself. It is, but it's also for them. For me, I need to change things. Ben studied him, measuring whether contrition would crystallize into action or dissolve into sentiment. You can start, he said. But you have to keep going when there's no siren. Daniel nodded once, as if he'd been given an assignment instead of absolution. He looked at Lila. Do you want to go home for a while? Get clothes? See the sunlight? She looked at the window, at the slice of day like a promise. Only if Mr. Ben comes. He has a shift, Daniel said, then straightened. What time? 2, Ben said, without needing to check. Then we have time, Daniel said. We'll go together. We'll lock the door you left open when you ran for help. We'll pick up what fell. We'll come back before your shift and He stopped. I'll meet you at the lobby at 2, he said, committing himself to a clock that belonged to someone else's day. Ben nodded. All right. They moved like a small caravan through the hospital, down elevators, past people whose stories hurt in similar shapes. In the car, Lila stared out at a city that looked the same as yesterday and wasn't. Daniel drove without honking, without taking calls, without thinking about shareholders. He thought about towels in a second drawer. At the house, the air smelled like bleach and fear. They stepped over tape across the doorway. Daniel stood in the living room and realized he had no idea where anything went, because he had never paid attention to where the life he loved kept its details. Lila's shoes squeaked again on the tile. Ben righted the lamp, set a framed photo back on the shelf, bent to pick up the purse that had spilled like an autopsy of a day. Keys, receipts, gum, a half-written grocery list, milk, spinach, granola bars, Lila's pencils. Daniel picked up the list and felt his throat tighten at the ordinariness. I didn't know she needed pencils, he said, and hated the confession and loved that it hurt. Ben knelt where the blood had been worst, eyes going distant in a way that meant he wasn't seeing this room anymore. He saw another, with trains on the wallpaper and a toy truck still running against a baseboard, wheels spinning soundlessly after the batteries had died. He swallowed, stood, turned. Let's go, he said. There's nothing here you need more than being with her. They left. The door closed. The lock turned. The house held its breath. Back at the hospital, they found Claire asleep again, color better, monitors less frantic. Lila drew in a notebook with a borrowed pen. Daniel sat beside his wife and learned the rhythm of waiting, coffee that cooled untouched, time that stretched and shrank, thoughts that wandered into corners he had never swept. Ben checked the clock. I have to go, he said. Lila looked up. Will you come back after your shift? I will, Ben said. He meant it. Daniel stood, unsure of whether to offer a hand, a hug, a lifelong debt written in ink. He settled for words. I want to talk when you're done, he said. All right, Ben said. He left the room, moved down corridors he had once ruled, past a sign that he could have designed in his sleep, sanitizer reminders, hand-washing technique, a poster about kindness with a stock photo of hands forming a heart. And he almost laughed with an old, bitter part of himself that had thought kindness could be printed. He walked out into a day he didn't own, to a shift where he would move chairs and empty bins, and know that sometimes the smallest motions were the ones that kept a world from collapsing inward. He arrived at the glass tower just before 2. The lobby shone again, all evidence of last night gone but for the ghost of a child's cry in someone's memory. Ben picked up his cart. He didn't look at the executives who looked at him differently now. With curiosity they mistook for respect. At 2 on the dot, Daniel stepped out of the elevator and didn't head for meetings. He headed for the man with the mop. Can you spare 10 minutes? He asked. I have work, Ben said, not unkindly. Daniel nodded, took the handle of the cart himself, absurd and appropriate. Walk with me then, he said, pushing. And for the first time since he'd built it, the CEO felt the weight of his building in his hands. They moved side by side, the cart squeaking on a seam where the marble met the rubber mat. A receptionist stared. A pair of managers stopped mid-whisper. Daniel didn't lower his voice. I owe everyone here an apology, he said as they walked. But I'm going to start with you. You've already thanked me, Ben said. I didn't say thank you, Daniel replied. I said apology. Ben's eyes flicked to him. Go on. They emerged into an atrium where afternoon light fell in orderly rectangles. Daniel stopped and turned. The receptionist, the managers, 2 interns, a security guard, they all hovered within earshot because the world loves a spectacle almost as much as it fears being called on to help. Daniel spoke to Ben, but let the others hear every word. I'm sorry for every day I treated you like you were furniture, he said. I'm sorry for every time your name took a back seat to your job. I'm sorry for building a company where a child's cry could freeze a room. That's on me. The security guard shifted, guilt tugging at his belt. The receptionist looked down. Ben's mouth twitched. Not a smile, not approval, but the flicker of a man who recognizes when someone opens a window in a stale room. What are you going to do about it? He asked. Change it, Daniel said. Not with a memo, with money, policies, training, and time. He turned toward the small audience. All hands in the lobby, 20 minutes. Tell everyone no excuses. The managers blinked. One started to say something about calendars, then didn't. The message spread like brushfire. The CEO was calling an all hands in the lobby, not the auditorium, not via video, not when convenient. Now, Ben reached for the cart handle again. You don't need me here. I do, Daniel said. You're the reason I'm doing this right now instead of filing it in the tray where good intentions go to die. A murmur rose as employees drifted in. Engineers with badges on lanyards, janitorial staff in navy polos, cafeteria workers, designers with headphones propped on their necks, HR with tablets clutched like shields, PR with eyes already measuring angles and quotes. The board member who had called twice came in thin-lipped, flanked by 2 others. They took positions that looked casual and weren't. Daniel stepped onto the low ledge by the planter, an improvised stage. He didn't wait for microphones, he raised his voice. Last night my wife was attacked, he said. Silence fell with a soft, stunned thump. My daughter ran in here for help. Some of you froze, some of you moved. One of you moved first. He looked at Ben, then back to the crowd. He saved my wife's life before the ambulance arrived. I know what some of you are thinking. That's his job to help. No, his job is written on a schedule. What he did came from who he is. A pulse of emotion moved through the room like heat over asphalt. I've been proud of this company, Daniel continued. Today I'm not. A culture that makes people hesitate when a child begs for help is a culture I built. I'm tearing that down. A PR head took a half-step forward. Daniel, perhaps we should... No spin, he said, without looking at her. Here's what we're doing. 1. Immediate pay raise and benefits parity for janitorial and cafeteria staff with our corporate staff. 2. Emergency response training for everyone, mandatory, real drills, real scenarios. 3. A hardship fund for any employee or family in crisis, funded by executive bonuses, including mine. 4. No more ignoring names. We're printing badges with names on both sides, yours and the person's you're speaking to, and we'll use them. Whispers surged. Disbelief, hope, cynicism arguing with relief. A board member cut in, voice smooth as wet glass. Daniel, these decisions require board approval. Daniel's jaw set. You're hearing my recommendation as CEO. You can vote later. Today, I'm making a promise as a person. Promises without process expose us to risk, the board member said. You're emotional. I'm human, Daniel said. He looked around. So are they. So are you. If you need a number to feel safe, I'll give you 1. It's cheaper to build a company where people help than to settle lawsuits because we didn't. A laugh broke from somewhere, not because it was funny, but because the truth sometimes wears a grin when it's tired of knocking politely. Daniel turned slightly, opened a space beside him with a palm. Ben, would you? Ben shook his head. This isn't my stage, he said softly. It is if you want it, Daniel said. Ben stepped up, not because he wanted a stage, but because he had a thing to say that would rot if he left it unsaid. He faced the crowd, hands open at his sides. I'm not here to be a symbol, he said. I'm here to remind you your hands work. When someone needs help, use them. He nodded toward a pair of interns he'd seen by the elevator last night, frozen and wide-eyed. You were scared. It's okay to be scared. It's not okay to do nothing when you can do something. One of the interns flushed, nodded, tears brightening her eyes. The crowd shifted again, uncomfortable, giving way to something else. A paramedic from last night had wandered in, summoned by gossip or fate on his lunch break. He stood at the edge of the group and called out before he could talk himself out of it. He's being modest, he said, pointing at Ben. He knew exactly what to do. That woman would be dead if he hadn't... Ben flinched at dead, at the word that had turned his life into a smaller room. The paramedic stopped, suddenly aware of lines he'd crossed. Daniel filled the silence. We're going to build a place where knowing what to do is normal, he said, and where we treat the people who clean our floors like the people who sign our checks. The board member folded his arms. What you're proposing breaks our compensation structure. Then our structure was broken, Daniel said. A cafeteria worker raised a tentative hand. Will sick days be paid? She asked. My daughter's asthma, sometimes I can't. Yes, Daniel said. Paid sick days for you, for all of you. Effective now, HR will have details by end of day. HR looked pained and a little electrified. The PR head recovered enough to step forward. We should announce this, she said. It's good. It shows... We'll announce it to the people it affects first, Daniel said. If it trends, good. If it doesn't, we'll still have done the right thing. A murmur of something like approval rippled. The board member tried again. We still need a vote. You'll get one, Daniel said, and I'll stand by it. If you vote no, you'll do it in writing with your names attached. The board member flushed, not used to being dared in public. You're grandstanding. Maybe, Daniel said. But I've grandstood for new products and valuations and awards. Today I'm grandstanding for the people who empty your trash and make your lunch. If that embarrasses you, ask yourself why. Silence. Then, from somewhere near the back, a slow clap began. It wasn't ironic. It was a sound that asked others to be brave. Another clap, then a dozen, then the sound built until it was a soft storm in the lobby. Ben stepped down first. He didn't bask. He pushed his cart again because floors do not mop themselves after speeches. Daniel stepped down too, falling into step beside him. You just made enemies, Ben said quietly. I had enemies already, Daniel said. They were just pretending to be friends. You also made promises, Ben added. I intend to keep them, Daniel said. They reached the service corridor. The hum of the building sounded different here. Compressors, vents, the heartbeat of a place that likes to pretend it's quiet. Ben opened a door with his hip, the cart sliding through like a ritual he'd learned by repetition and penance. A man in a navy polo, a co-worker from Ben's crew, waited in the hallway, hands stuffed deep in pockets. "They told me what you did," he said to Ben without preamble. "I didn't move last night. I heard her crying and I just—" He swallowed. "I froze. I keep seeing her face." Ben nodded. "You move next time?" "I will," the man said. "I'm sorry." "Make it mean something," Ben said. "That's how sorry works." Daniel watched the exchange like someone studying a language he wished he'd learned as a child. He felt an ache he couldn't place, like a muscle waking up. His phone buzzed, a text, then 3. The board had scheduled an emergency meeting. He almost laughed. "Of course," he murmured. Ben's supervisor appeared at the end of the hallway, frowning, clipboard under his arm. "Cole," he said, "you missed the start of your shift." "Traffic," Ben said simply. The supervisor sniffed, then noticed Daniel, recalibrated. "Mr. Grant," he said, "didn't see you there." "Do you know his name?" Daniel asked. The supervisor blinked. "Yes, Ben." "Use it," Daniel said, "and give him the time he needs." "He saved my wife's life last night." The supervisor's face softened, embarrassment coloring his cheeks. "Of course," he said. "Take the time you need, Ben." "I'll work," Ben said. "I need to," Daniel nodded once. He could feel another world tugging at him. The conference room, the votes, the carefully worded objections. He put a hand on the cart handle again. "I'll be back," he said. "We're not done." "You never are," Ben said. Daniel went to the elevator and up into the part of the building that had always felt like his. He walked into a boardroom that smelled like citrus and conflict. The board sat like judges, screens glowing with numbers that had never looked more irrelevant. The chair cleared his throat. "Daniel, we sympathize. But you cannot unilaterally—" "I didn't," Daniel said, taking his seat. "I told the truth and made proposals. You're here to vote. They started with risk. They always did. Someone said precedent. Someone said optics. Someone said fiduciary duty like it was a clean word." Daniel listened, then spoke without raising his voice. "Our duty is to build a company people are proud to work for. If your spreadsheets can't value that, rebuild your spreadsheets," a member leaned forward. "And if the market punishes us, then we'll have the right enemies," Daniel said. "And the right allies. Customers aren't fools." "People can smell decency." "You're emotional," the chair repeated. "I'm awake," Daniel said. They voted. It wasn't unanimous. It wasn't even comfortable, but it passed. And when it did, Daniel felt something unclench he hadn't known was clenched for years. He stepped out, texted HR and PR in 2 sentences. It passed. Announced to staff first, draft policy docs by tomorrow. He stopped by the restroom, washed his hands, stared at a face he barely recognized. Tired, human. He dried them, tossed the towel, and went back to the lobby. Ben was on his knees scraping gum from under a bench with a little plastic blade. It was the kind of work people don't see until it doesn't get done, work that keeps clean things clean. Daniel crouched beside him. "Did they approve?" Ben asked without looking up. "They did." "Good." "They didn't like me much," Daniel said. "They'll like the results," Ben said, "or they won't. That part's not your problem if you do the right thing." Daniel watched the small, stubborn motion of the blade. "Why did you stop?" he asked softly. "Being a doctor?" Ben froze, the blade halfway through its slow scrape. He sat back on his heels, wiped his hands on a rag, and met Daniel's gaze. "My son," he said. His name was Oliver. Daniel waited. "He had a congenital heart defect we didn't catch early," Ben said, voice even as a measure. "He crashed suddenly. I took him to my own ER. I made the call to operate. I made a brilliant plan. I made a mistake. He died on my table." He swallowed. "I kept seeing my hands on him. For months, for years. They felt dirty, so I cleaned things. It made a kind of sense." Daniel felt the floor tilt and then right itself. "I'm sorry," he said, and didn't rush to put other words around it. Ben nodded. "Me too." "Could you ever go back?" Daniel asked. "To medicine?" "I don't know," Ben said. "My hands remember, my mind remembers." "My heart." He glanced at the blade. "My heart is still scrubbing," Daniel breathed out slowly. "If you ever wanted to teach, to train us, to run the wellness program, I'll think about it," Ben said. "But don't ask me to be your poster. Don't ask me to forgive myself on a schedule you set." "I won't," Daniel said. He stood, offered a hand without thinking what it meant. Ben looked at it, then took it. let himself be pulled to his feet. The contact was brief, human, untransactional. They both looked up when the elevator chimed. Lila sprinted out, hair flying, cheeks bright. She flung herself at Ben first. "Mom's awake again?" She asked if the janitor was okay. She laughed, free and bell-like. "I told her your name." "What did she say?" Ben asked, smiling despite himself. "She said, 'Tell him he's not allowed to mop the floor in heaven because he's going to be too busy telling stories to my daughter.'" Ben laughed, the sound loose, surprised. Daniel grinned and ruffled Lila's hair. "She's better." "She's better," Lila echoed, and the three of them stood there a moment, a strange little circle in the middle of a lobby that had learned something in a day it would not forget. Ben's laugh hung in the air, small and real. Lila beamed, her joy cutting through the sterile lobby like sunlight breaking cloud. Daniel crouched to her level. "Hey, champ, you okay?" She nodded. "Mom says I'm brave." "She's right," Daniel said. "You ran faster than anyone I know." Lila turned to Ben. "Are you going to come see her tonight?" Ben hesitated. "If it's all right with your parents." Daniel's voice softened. "It's more than all right." He straightened, looked at his watch, then at Ben. "Come tonight." "Dinner's on me. I don't need—" "It's not payment," Daniel cut in. "It's dinner." Ben's mouth quirked. "All right." "After my shift." Lila grinned. "I'll save you pie." "Pie?" Ben asked. "Apple," she said solemnly. "The kind Mom makes when Dad isn't too busy." Daniel's smile cracked. "She makes it better than anyone." Ben looked at him, understanding without pity. "Then I'll be there." When Lila ran back toward the elevators, Daniel lingered. "She trusts you," he said quietly. "She trusts people who show up," Ben said. Daniel nodded, the words sitting heavy. "That used to be me. I want it to be again." "Then start showing up," Ben said, simple as breathing. That night, the hospital room glowed softer. Claire was awake, pale but present, with Lila tucked beside her. Daniel sat on one side of the bed, Ben on the other, awkward in the chair, hands folded. Claire smiled faintly. "So the mysterious janitor turns out to be the man who saved me." Ben ducked his head. "I just did what anyone trained would have done." Daniel laughed quietly. "Trained," he echoed. "Understatement of the year." Claire looked between them. "Daniel told me you were a doctor." Ben hesitated. "Was. A long time ago?" "Then that explains the calm," she said. "You didn't flinch." "I remember that, even through the fog." Ben's eyes softened. "I'm glad you're all right." "I am because of you," she said. "You brought my daughter back to me." He shook his head. "She brought me to you." Lila stirred. "Told you he's a hero," she murmured before sleep reclaimed her. Claire's gaze lingered on Ben. "Sometimes heroes need to forgive themselves, too," she said gently. Ben looked away, throat tight, working on it. Later, after Lila slept and nurses changed IVs, Daniel spoke again. "I meant what I said about the new wellness program. You'd run it better than anyone." Ben smiled faintly. "You don't even have a program yet." "I will tomorrow," Daniel said. "And it'll start with you." Ben shook his head. "I clean floors." "You save lives," Daniel countered. "That's the foundation of wellness." Ben studied him. "You really mean it?" Daniel's eyes were steady. "For once, yeah." They sat in quiet. Machines hummed, the rhythm of survival filling the gaps where words couldn't reach. When Ben finally rose to leave, Claire reached for his hand. "Thank you, Dr. Cole," she whispered. He froze. The name hit like an echo from a past life, sharp and tender. "It's Ben now," he said softly. She smiled. "Then thank you, Ben." He slipped out before the lump in his throat could answer for him. The next morning, Grant Tech buzzed. News spread faster than coffee. Articles, internal posts, whispers. CEO overturns pay structure. Janitor saves CEO's wife. Grant Tech pledges culture change. Daniel read them all without pride. He called HR at dawn, had policies rewritten, told PR to hold the press release until after the first checks cleared. By noon, a small press cluster waited outside anyway. Flashbulbs popped. A reporter called out, "Mr. Grant, is it true a janitor saved your wife's life?" Daniel stopped at the doors. "It's true," he said, "but you're missing the point." "What's that?" He shouldn't have had to be extraordinary for us to treat him with respect. The answer ran that night on every feed. Comments poured in. Wish my boss thought like that. Faith in humanity restored. That janitor deserves a medal. At 7, Daniel returned to the hospital with takeout bags and a promise kept. Ben was already there, sitting by Lila's bed, listening as she explained how her mom's stitches looked like tiny silver train tracks. Claire laughed, weak but brighter. Daniel set the food down. Dinner as promised. Ben blinked at the spread, chicken, mashed potatoes, pie. You didn't have to. I did, Daniel said. We needed it. They ate, not like strangers, but like people orbiting the same fragile miracle. Claire teased Daniel about his burnt toast attempts. Daniel teased her about her stubbornness. Lila interrupted with questions that made them all laugh. When plates emptied, Claire leaned back, eyes misty. You know, she said, maybe this saved more than my life. Daniel frowned gently. What do you mean? You, she said simply. Us. Our family. Ben stood to leave, sensing he'd stayed at the edge of something sacred long enough. I'll head out, he said. Wait, Daniel said. He pulled an envelope from his jacket and handed it over, a token. For what you did. Ben looked at it, then back up. I can't take money for doing what's right. It's not money, Daniel said. It's an offer letter. You'll head the new Wellness and Safety Initiative. You'll teach our people how to act when someone's in need. Ben froze. Daniel, you'll have resources, your own team, full authority, Daniel said, and a salary that matches what you deserve. Ben stared at the paper. You're serious? Dead serious, Claire smiled. You'd be perfect. Ben's throat worked. I don't know if I can step back into that world. You already did, Daniel said. You just didn't notice. Ben sat again, holding the letter like a fragile thing. Let me think. Take all the time you need, Daniel said. But I'm not offering it twice. Ben looked up. I believe you. They shared a grin that felt like peace. The next week blurred into motion. HR scrambled to implement Daniel's reforms. Training rooms filled with staff learning CPR and first aid. Ben moved through them like quiet gravity, correcting, encouraging, rebuilding confidence in hands that had once frozen. Daniel watched from the doorway one afternoon, unseen. Ben demonstrated chest compressions, voice steady. You're not fighting death, he told the trainees. You're giving life a chance. That's all medicine ever was. Applause broke when he finished. Daniel turned away before anyone saw the pride on his face. He met Claire later in her recovery room. She was reading the article on her phone. They're calling him the janitor turned hero. Daniel chuckled. He hates that. I bet, she said. He's not chasing headlines. No, Daniel said. But I might owe him more than gratitude. He gave me a mirror. Claire reached for his hand. Then don't look away. I won't, he promised. A week later, Ben signed the offer. Not with flourish, but with resolve. One condition, he told Daniel. I want every worker from top to bottom trained. No exceptions, that includes you. Daniel smiled. Deal. The first training session was awkward. Executives fumbled with mannequins, suits rolled up sleeves, laughter nervous. Ben moved among them, correcting grip, counting aloud. 1, 2, 3, press through fear, not the chest, he said. Daniel miscounted once. Ben grinned. You'll get there. Feels different when it's not a spreadsheet, Daniel said. That's the point, Ben replied. By month's end, the company buzzed with a new rhythm. Less hierarchy, more heart. The cafeteria had posters celebrating Helpers of the Week. Lila's drawing, Ben with a mop and a doctor's coat, hung framed in the lobby. Daniel stood beneath it one afternoon, smiling. Ben joined him. Didn't think my face would ever be on a wall again, he said. It's not a face, Daniel said. It's a reminder. Ben nodded. Of what? That the people who keep us alive don't always have titles, Daniel said. Ben smiled. I'll drink to that. They laughed. For once, laughter didn't echo hollow off the marble. It stayed, warm, grounded. At 10, Daniel appeared with coffee. Thought you might need this. Ben accepted it. You know, you don't have to keep proving you're human. Daniel smiled. Maybe I like the practice. Ben chuckled. Keep practicing. The world needs it. The two men stood in companionable silence, watching employees filter in, greeting each other by name, a small miracle Ben had taught them to notice. Weeks rolled by, and Grant Tech no longer felt like the same building. The sterile shine that once intimidated now carried warmth. Handshakes in the halls, names remembered, greetings exchanged between departments that used to pass like strangers. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. Ben had traded his mop cart for a simple badge that read, Ben Cole, Director, Wellness and Care. He still helped the cleaning crew in the mornings, claiming it kept him grounded. You can't heal people if you forget what their world looks like, he'd tell anyone who asked. Daniel's office had changed too. The polished glass that once separated him from the world now stayed open. No more do not disturb signs. He'd replaced the wall of awards with photographs, his family smiling, the staff volunteering, and one of Ben holding a training dummy while a dozen employees practiced CPR, faces intent, hopeful. Claire recovered faster than doctors expected. The scar on her head faded, but the lesson stayed. She visited the office often now, sometimes bringing Lila to watch the new wellness drills. Lila loved holding the timer, shouting, "Start!" and giggling when people stumbled through their practice. One afternoon, Daniel found Ben teaching a group of interns. "What if we panic?" one asked. Ben smiled. "Then remember, panic is just your body trying to help you faster than your brain can process. Slow it down. Focus on the next small thing. One breath, one count, one step." Daniel leaned against the doorway. "You sound like you've done this before," he said with a grin. Ben raised an eyebrow. "Maybe once or twice." The interns laughed and Daniel joined them. For the first time in years, his laughter didn't feel like a performance. Later, Daniel pulled Ben aside. "I want to expand the wellness program. Partner with hospitals, maybe fund scholarships for emergency response training. You'd oversee it." Ben hesitated. "That's a lot of trust." "It's earned," Daniel said. "And I think we can turn what happened into something that keeps helping people." Ben looked out the window, eyes on the city skyline. "I used to believe I could only save one life at a time. Maybe this is better," Daniel nodded. "It is." The months passed, and with them came quiet transformations. The janitorial staff got new uniforms, not flashy, just comfortable and dignified. Employees volunteered together at shelters, food banks, clinics. The board's skepticism melted into acceptance as productivity rose, and employee turnover dropped. For once, kindness had metrics. One late evening, Daniel stayed behind, finishing emails. The office lights dimmed to night mode, leaving pools of gold. Ben appeared at the door, still in his work clothes, a smudge on his cuff from wiping tables. "Thought you left hours ago," Daniel said. "Old habits," Ben replied. "Places feel different when they're empty." "You can hear their heartbeat," Daniel smiled. "What's it saying tonight?" Ben shrugged. "It's calm, tired." "Healing." "Like us," Daniel said. They stood in silence. Daniel finally broke it. "I've been meaning to ask, why did you really come to work at Grant Tech? You could have gone anywhere." Ben took a slow breath. "I needed to be invisible for a while." "I saw your job posting one day. Maintenance staff wanted, night shifts. I figured mopping floors would keep my hands busy. Help me forget the sound of a heart monitor flatlining." Daniel looked down. "I'm sorry you went through that alone." Ben shook his head. "I wasn't ready for company then. But the funny thing about life, it puts you where you're needed, even when you don't want to be needed." Daniel smiled faintly. "And now?" "Now I'm needed," Ben said. "And I can handle that." Daniel leaned back on his desk, arms folded. "You know, sometimes I wonder if you were sent here on purpose. Not by fate or anything mystical, just like the world needed to slap me awake and you were the hand." Ben laughed quietly. "I'll take that as a compliment." "It is." Just then, a knock on the door interrupted them. Lila peeked in, holding a plate covered in foil. "Mom made cookies," she announced proudly. "And she said if you two are working late again, you need real food." Ben smiled. "Your mom's right." Lila set the plate on the desk and turned to Daniel. "Dad, can I tell him something?" "Of course." She looked at Ben, earnest eyes gleaming. "When Mom was in the hospital, I prayed every night that someone would help her. Then you came. So I think you're the answer." They clinked glasses. Lila stood up, holding her drawing again, the one with Ben in a doctor's coat and a mop. "To heroes who clean up and fix hearts," she added solemnly. Everyone laughed. Later, as the dishes were cleared and the candles burned low, Daniel turned to Ben. "Do you ever miss it? The hospital, the white coat?" Ben thought for a long time. "Sometimes," he said. "But this feels closer to medicine than anything I've done in years. I used to treat patients. Now I treat people before they break." Daniel nodded. "You're saving lives either way." Ben smiled. "So are you." When the night ended and everyone said their goodbyes, Ben lingered for a moment at the doorway. "You've got a good family, Daniel." "I know," Daniel said. "And I plan on keeping it that way." Ben patted his shoulder. "Then keep showing up." "I will," Daniel said. As Ben walked into the cool night, he glanced up at the sky again. No miracles this time, just quiet gratitude. A week later, Grant Tech unveiled a small plaque in the lobby. It didn't mention titles or awards. It simply read, "To those who help when no one is watching." Ben saw it for the first time one morning as he passed by with his coffee. He stopped, smiled, and whispered, "Nice touch, Daniel." Behind him, Daniel appeared, coffee in hand, too. "You inspired it," Ben chuckled. "Just don't put my name on it." "Too late," Daniel said. "Check the back." Ben turned the plaque gently. Engraved in small letters were the words, "For Ben Cole, who reminded us what it means to care." He didn't speak for a while. Then quietly, "You shouldn't have." Daniel smiled. "I know, but I wanted to." Ben exhaled, a sound between a sigh and a laugh. "Guess I'll have to keep living up to it." "You already are," Daniel said. That evening, as the last employees left, Ben lingered by the plaque. The lobby lights cast a soft glow, and his reflection shimmered beside the engraved words. He whispered one last time, "We did good, kid." Outside, the city pulsed with life. Somewhere, sirens wailed, cars honked, laughter echoed from a distant corner. The world kept moving, chaotic, beautiful, unpredictable. But in one building, in one company, a seed of humility had taken root, and it would keep growing, one act of kindness at a time. As the end credits rolled on the uploaded video, Daniel's voice came through one final time. "If this story touched your heart, take a moment to share it. Someone out there needs the reminder that kindness still saves lives." Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more stories that prove humanity still shines in unexpected places. And remember, be kind, because you never know when you'll be someone's miracle. Everyone has the power to help.